We are now going to move on to our pro-drug counselor. I probably got more questions about that than anything else about this event. Pro-drug, does that mean professional or pro-drug? I'm like, maybe both. But Jeff Connors is going to take the floor. Very happy that you're here with us tonight and interested to hear what you have to say, man. Welcome.
Well, I have my pro-drug tea with me.
Nice.
So that's helpful. This spot's quite wonderful. Thanks, Aaron, for inviting me. This will be the spoken word traditional piece, undeniably. Melter, wonderful job, buddy.
Oh, thank you.
That was fantastic. And I feel a little bit bad not being able to do some performance art like you guys can. So hopefully some wit and whimsical spirit will help out. When I was first invited, it was really about psychedelics and the idea about just altered states and consciousness and the benefits and or not. And so we had some wonderful conversations. So when we talk about it, I have this idea about a spiritual ECT. I don't know if anybody knows what ECTs are. Electroconvulsive therapy. So shocks to the brain, right? They do this for depression, they do it for a bunch of other things. Psychologists have no flipping idea how it works, but it does work well for people with depression and other things. My idea with psychedelics is around spirituality as a shock to the brain. And so when I was thinking about this, I guess my part around this, I am a drug counselor. Just so you know, I have a degree, a couple of them, work on another one. I got about 10 years of experience. In the drug field anyway, and my history is really around youth and a bunch of other things. But psychedelics generally, I'll use the word entheogen because it means God within. And I like that a little bit better. Psychedelics, though, is a good word. I don't know if you know the history of that. It comes from Humphrey Osborne, who was in Weyburn, Saskatchewan, of all places. And if anyone ever heard Doors of Perception? Anyone heard of that idea? Yeah, he's the guy who dosed Aldous Huxley, just so you know, and started that book and how that went. And so the idea, historically with entheogens, keep going. Yeah, I have nothing that important to say, don't worry. He's just trying to fill up some time with filler. So historically, obviously, entheogens coming from plants have been a long time coming. They've been on every continent except Australia. And I think it's because they sent a bunch of criminals there to hang out with Aborigines, and Aborigines say, we ain't talking yet. I'm sure the traditional people here would like to say the same. But they've used them for a long time, and mostly it was for, you look at the Incas, they had them. If you go back to Greece, they had a special drug thing they could consume and put you in an altered state. And really the idea was to get you connected to God or goddesses or Gaia, which always weirds me out as a feminist at some level, why a female god be called Guy. But anyway, that's a separate issue. So traditionally these were used for a long time, and it's really about altered states. So my thing around it is, that was used for a long time historically. Traditionally, in the 50s and 60s, psychedelics were used to figure out pure psychosis. And I don't want to show of hands here. I don't want anybody to out themselves. But you might have had friends that have used psychedelics, right? I had some friends that used psychedelics back in the day, right? And they found them to be intriguing, to say the least. They're a fascinating drug for a number of reasons. One is that the addictive potential is very low. And I say this as a drug counselor because I've never had someone pull up a chair, sit down beside me and go, Jeff, I'm using so much mushrooms, I've sold my car, I'm losing my house, I'm selling my body. Never happened. And never will. Anyone who's done these drugs knows that generally if you do a high dose, you're probably taking a week off to figure out what the hell happened. And try to piece it together, you're drawing stuff, you're figuring it out, what happened in that. And so, in the 50s and 60s, they did a bunch of stuff. And so, for example, anyone heard of this idea of AA, right? To get rid of alcoholism, right? One of the original... What's that?
Astrum Argentum? Oh, that's Crowley's. Never mind.
Yeah, sorry, different name. So one of the original guys, one of the Bills, actually took LSD. And one of his ideas was hitting rock bottom. And they thought LSD would help with that. Because if you go through the DTs, I work at a place where they have a detox center. And so I see people really not doing well, honestly, quite frankly, in a lot of time. But alcoholism is one of those drugs that will kill you if you stop quickly. Right? If you're a true alcoholic, and trust me, it takes a long time to be an alcoholic. You gotta work really hard at it. You gotta drink every day and lots. It's not something you just come into, right? Not like cocaine or heroin, right? After a few days, like I've never seen someone do an 8 ball and go, geez, that's perfect. Gotta go home and make supper. Right? That doesn't happen often, right? They should just call it more, right? So with entheogens, you can have that happen. You do a drug and then off you go. You stop for a while. And so in Weyburn, Saskatchewan, in North Hollywood, and New Westminster, they have these hospitals set up to dose people properly, whatever that means. You can keep that to yourself. To help you with AA and things. And so, for example, with people with alcoholism, true alcoholism, they found a 50% success rate, which is unheard of in treatment. I'd be lucky to say I think I'm decent at it. I don't get close to that. And so that was interesting. And then, of course, counterculture came and shut it all down. The research stopped. And the only research that came after that was National Institute of Drug Abuse. And they only studied drug abuse. So you will never see a positive study coming out of the United States, a major person publishing stuff on drug use, because they just don't fund the shit. That's the way it works. So the benefit of that, though, I will say quite clearly, is that we know a lot about the problems of drugs. Don't know a lot of the benefits of the drugs. Your pharmaceutical, I bet your doctor will tell you a lot of good stuff about some drugs, and why we create 16 probably every day. That's a separate issue. So there's been a resurgence lately, and I don't know if anyone's heard of MAPS, Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies.
Got one of their literature pieces on the book rack there.
Oh, do you? Excellent.
Actually, yeah.
Excellent. And so there's some research being done, for example, out of Vancouver, post-traumatic stress disorder and ecstasy. And again, I'm not going to out people here, but if anyone's had friends do ecstasy, know that it's really difficult to hate people when you're on such a substance. And being a man, I'll suggest one of the major problems in society is some of my culture. Men aren't quite particularly helpful in a lot of situations. Just look at murders, 88% of the population are murdered by a man. 65% are men being murdered by other men. We don't even love ourselves, right? But so simple things, I'm suggesting, might be beneficial. For example, small doses. I'm not talking huge, let's get fucked up doses. But little dose. Anyone ever go to their doctor and go, geez, how's that dose? Does it work? Right? You go low, you go high, right? Any female try to get a birth control pill that works? How many are out there? How many you gotta try? What works, what doesn't? Geez, they'll keep giving you drugs and drugs and drugs. Right? But I think there are options, for example, with things simple like MDMA. LSD, for example, cluster headaches. Anyone's ever cluster headaches? They're looking at some really good research with that. My part is around spirituality. Because I think one of the basics of being human is believing in something bigger than yourself. Otherwise, you're psychopathology, right? You run Wall Street. You only think about you and making money. And so I think there's some really good benefits there. If you look at meditation and yoga, of course, these are really great as well. Anyone who's tried that knows some really good research in there about the brain being placid. It is not static as we used to think. And so there's great stuff there. And so one of my suggestions is, as a spiritual ECT, it's a great option for some people. Don't get me wrong. Some, if you have major mental health illness, you got to be careful. Set and setting. I'll be clear. If you do a high dose of a psychedelic drug and you don't know the place you're at or the people you're with, and your shoelaces start melting and babies pop out of the ceiling, you're going to have a bad trip. I think that's safe to say. But if you know the place you are, and you're okay with the people, and you understand you're on drugs, you might be okay. And I'm not talking about the studies you used to do, trying to figure out if acid helped. They strap you in a gurney and dose you really highly and figure if you had a good trip or not.
Ready for that after 20 years of doing that.
Yeah! Yeah. Please just hit the morphine IV. Right? Just that slow drip. Not the STD slow drip, right? That's not helpful. So one of my ideas is, and I was thankful to have the opportunity to talk about this, because I think there's some really good research coming out around the possibilities and really looking at it as a medicine. And obviously it's not for everybody, it's not for every time, but if you look at change, and there's this idea of quantum change. Anyone ever heard of something? Maybe you've had this happen. All of a sudden you want to change something, be it exercise, be it diet, be it drug use, be it relationships, be whatever. All of a sudden you go, boom, fuck, done with that. And off you go. Right? Some people struggle for a long time. I struggle going to the gym. I go a lot of time to the gym. I just shower and leave. I said I went that day. I went to the gym and I said I exercised. My change is there. Right? But we struggle with this stuff. And so it might be an option to get people on their way. Will it be everything? Will it solve all the problems? Absolutely not. I think it's ridiculous for anyone to say that. You need to be very cautious of a drug that makes you hear sights, feel sounds, right? Synesthesia, right? Anyone who's tried this drug or related knows that all of a sudden you see music. Wow, that's neat. Right? And it can be. Or it can be terrifying. Right? Depending on who and where you are.
And what music?
And what music? And what time?
And what
Both
chords?
at the same time.
And what chords? What's that?
Or both at the same time.
Exactly, right? And one of my challenges always with drugs is we'll talk about a specific drug. We'll talk about what's marijuana do? What's nicotine do? What's alcohol do? What's cocaine do? All neat. What if I want to do a line, smoke a joint, have a drink, and a cigarette? Then what happens? Nobody knows. And I had soup that day. Nobody knows how that all works, right? We're not studying that stuff. And so I think there are a lot of options and benefits out there. And luckily, places like MAPS, I like to say it's more affiliated with, or not, are looking at some of this because I think there's some real benefits as far as society generally, us individually, and I think it's a culture that loved each other more. Tell me someone who's tried, you might have friends, again, try this, go out and do a hallucinogen, very simple one, maybe even cannabis, and all of a sudden they love trees. That's on my office the other day going, I couldn't believe it. I went to my friend and said, I love you. And they went, fuck off. No, but I love you. And just the whole idea of that, or righteous little bugs that you chase while you're camping. I don't see that being necessarily a bad thing for society, given our post-industrial military complex that we have from our neighbors to our south. I think that's a nice, valid option. And so with that, I'll leave with the idea of a spiritual ECT being a shock to the head, to the body, to the spirit. Might be beneficial for some people sometimes.
Thank you. Cheers.
How do we publicize that? I think there's some great ways, right? For example, one of the things I'll say with cannabis, as a drug counselor, you need to go talk to your doctor if you get benefits from it. For a bunch of reasons. One, your doctor's probably trained a long time ago and believes it's a legal drug, so stop talking about it. So you gotta say, hey, I get benefits, dude. Or do that. Just so you know. Can you give me something else that matches that? No. What do we do then? Marinol doesn't count. It's not a whole drug extract. Right? So then you go, what can I do with that? If you can't give me that, you kind of, again, it's raising the bar, conscious raising, good feminist stuff. Because I think without that, and open good discussions, some of the stuff MAPS has done is really good. They've really looked at the medical piece. What works, what does not. What's a danger? Let's be clear. Right? Anybody who does acid, I'll suggest, and they think they can fly, don't try it off the second floor. Try from the ground where ducks do. Right? You might say Bill Hicks.
Yes.
Right? He does not suggest seeing ducks take an elevator to the top floor to fly south.
Can you get good clean acid or what?
That's a challenge, right? Because it's illegal. We haven't looked at that, right? The only place it still does is Sandoz. And for example, the stuff in Vancouver that's happened with post-traumatic stress disorder, people that have really bad shit happen, let's be frank, and have a hard time integrating. Their big hang-up is they can't have access to the drug. Because ecstasy, traditionally, on the street, is the most impure of all drugs. Heroin's clear, right? Consistently, you know what you're getting. Ecstasy?
It's not,
Good
it's
luck.
not even actually.
Yeah, and that's a problem, right? And that's a problem, right? To me, as a just medical person worried about that, consistency, right? Even pot, though. When's the last time I had a friend go, hey, look, you go buy pot, you got 50% THC, blueberry bud, no herbicides, no pesticides, fully organic. Or they say, hey, I got some good shit. That doesn't quite count it for me, right? I don't know, 10, 15, 20, 30. And even when you talk to people, contact people, Canada's done a good job. They have this spray called Psychedelics for MS, under the tongue, subliminal stuff. And it works really well. Whole extract. But even when I talk to them, they can't tell me what makes me impaired to drive if I was to smoke such a substance. At what level, at my body weight. So that's a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, at least they are legalizing it slowly but surely for medicinal purposes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And there's some really good stuff happening. You look at Mexico, they've decriminalized all drugs.
Really?
Yeah. They're fighting a drug war at the same time, right? They're kind of like bipolar down there. They're not too sure what's going on.
They still haven't taken the money out of it, right?
They are. Well, what they're doing is saying, look, if you want to do a bit of speed, you want to do heroin, have at it. That's a medical issue. You want to move 2 kilos of it? Well, someone else will kill you. The cops will.
They're ignoring the issue though then, right?
Yeah.
How does everybody get it? It's legal to have, but how do you get it?
Exactly. Right. And so is Portugal has decriminalized everything as well. And they're seeing, just as Amsterdam did, and how the decreases in drug use. And so I think with that, and one of the benefits of BC's actually a leader in it. And so luckily some of that stuff, as I said, National Institute of Drug Abuse, only came out with drug problems. Now we're starting to see, hey, if you give heroin addicts heroin, they're actually fine. Right, and it works well. And so, how's that work? So, yeah. Yeah, Melter, yeah.
What is in a nutshell anyway, when it comes to entheogens, what is the physical margin of safety? What kind of setting do you recommend?
Yeah,
What's the
yeah.
practical guidelines
Yeah,
to safe,
yeah.
responsible
Yeah,
journey?
thank you. Yeah. Yeah, one of the benefits of entheogens, I'd say, is that you can't overdose on them. The margin of safety then compared to aspirin is significantly better, right? When you look at addiction, as I said, it's almost non-existent, if not non-existent. Although the new DSM has hallucinogen dependence, I like to see that. But I think the margin of safety is a gram per 100 pounds. And then it's set and steady, right? Being a safe spot, a bunch of people you know, and the place you've been. Thank you.
And I'm going to stop you fielding questions if people have them, but we're just going to let Adrian start a little
Yeah.
bit of feed behind you. So if anyone has anything else to say, it's still fine.
No, I was
It's
good.
going to be
One more
segue.
question perhaps. Speaking of traditional uses by Aboriginal people around
Yeah.
the world, can you maybe talk about what is known about their methods of use and their cultures and traditions of using it, and how we can perhaps integrate some of that into our own? Because most people, I find, in industrialized societies do drugs too. They don't even do entheogens that much. They usually just do some drug that fucks you up, basically.
Yep.
And there's not much of a they do it to escape reality, whereas a lot of these traditional uses that have been going on for thousands of years, yeah, it's to it's hallucinogen, as somebody called it. It's to get answers, to become more grounded in reality, to have a deeper understanding.
Yeah, and I think that's the misunderstanding of a lot of Aboriginal cultures, even with tobacco, for example. They'll say, well, it's traditional. Yeah, but they didn't smoke it every day, 40 times a day, right? Mushrooms, for example, or anything regionally, or even around this continent, there's a gatekeeper. It was called a shaman. And they would say, you're ready to go, your brain's well enough to do this, and you're stable enough, and off you go, and this is what happens. And so they did it for very clear, these people weren't using it every weekend. They were using it maybe twice in their life.